next week, Understanding Relapse. But this week we're going to be talking about While Your Fairy Godmother, Until Your Fairy Godmother Arrives. And it's by my friend Pam Paget. This is her book. And I want to tell you a little bit about Pam, and it's all in her book. And the reason I want to tell you about Pam, because if anyone can change, anyone can change their life if Pam could change hers. I remember, I grew up in West Texas in Odessa. Pam grew up in Pecos, Texas. And Pam's father was Billy Saul Estes. I don't know if any of y'all remember him, if you're old enough to remember him. But, in the United States, he's still known as the biggest wheeler dealer in the United States. And it's all in her book. And she wrote her first book was about living with Billy Saul, about her father. And so the first part of this book is about her early life. And I just want to tell you a little bit about Pam. And Pam's no longer with us. Pam passed away several years ago. I was actually at Lois Jordan's her outpatient program. There's Bill, it's his wife. I was up there doing a workshop. Pam lived in Granbury, Texas, and Pam and I had intended to meet. She was going to come to the workshop, and then we were going to spend the night and do some shopping in Dallas and just visit. And Pam was always on time. You could count on Pam she said something, she kept her word. And she didn't get to the workshop. And I started calling her, and I couldn't get her. She never answered the phone. Come to find out, she had got to Dallas and had passed out, and they took her to the hospital. And I won't go into all of it. Her daughter did call me. Pam had one of those brain tumors that you can't find until the autopsy. They didn't know what happened to Pam until they did an autopsy and diagnosed that it was that type of brain cancer. And so it was hard for all of us, particularly her family. Pam touched a lot of people with her story. So Pam, if you don't know anything about Billy Saul Estes, he was the wheeler dealer of all. By the time he was a young man, he moved to Pecos. And when he was a young man, he gathered together a fortune of over $100 million. Now that is in the 60s, and that's a lot of money, $100 million. And so he had been raised poor, and so he spent lots and lots and lots and lots of money. And so she was raised very wealthy, very affluently in Pecos, Texas. And so one night, her and her siblings were upstairs watching TV. And they flashed on the screen about that Billy Saul Estes had been arrested in Texas, in Pecos, Texas. So she ran downstairs, and she said there was a room full of people, 30, 40 people there. And she went up to her mom, and she said, "Was Dad arrested?" And she said, "Oh, it's all a mistake. He'll be home in 3 or 4 hours." Well, it wasn't. It wasn't a mistake. And he... she describes what happened. He was convicted. He went to federal penitentiary for over 7 years. And then he was arrested again years later and went back and served over 5 years. Billy Saul could not pass up any kind of a deal. They really put him right up there with, this was before our late president was president, but they compared him to Donald Trump, that as far as being a wheeler dealer. So anyway, she said that her mother sort of appeased them and, said everything was going to be all right. And then a few days later, they started coming and taking away the furniture. They took away the house. When she was 14, back then we could get our driver's license at age 14. And she asked her dad, they asked her what she wanted, and she wanted, he was going to buy her a Cadillac, and she couldn't decide what color, whether she wanted a white sedan or a pink convertible. And he said, well, I'll just buy you both. So he bought them both. And they came and got them. They came and got everything. Her mother took a box upstairs and said, put whatever you can in this box, because we're moving to Abilene. And this was overnight. So it started with, she was the oldest of 5, and Pam started being her mother's caretaker and her father's, she called it servitude. I mean, she became his everything, trying to help him with his legal problems and all. Anyway, it's a very sad story. Her younger brothers and sisters didn't fare as well as Pam, but Pam, at the very beginning, learned to take lemons and make lemonade out of it. And so, what Pam did, she had a couple of really bad relationships. You know, her picker was broke. She picked bad men to have relationships with. And when she got out of them, the first divorce, she got a real estate business. That was part of the settlement. But through the years, she decided she didn't want to be a real estate agent. Long story short, she went back to school, got her degree, and then decided to be a marriage and family therapist, which she did. And that's when I met Pam. I had always heard of Pam. We were about the same age. I think I'm a little older. I think I'm a little older than everybody. But anyway, how I met Pam, Pam came to see me. We had a colleague, Dr. Bob Barnes. He was her professor, and he was actually our psychologist at that time out at Shades. And he sent Pam to talk to me about doing her internship at Shades. Pam was very overweight. And I asked her, I said, do you really know what we do here? You know, it's all addiction, but we focus on eating disorders. And she said, oh yeah, I know what y'all do. And I said, well, do you know that we treat overeating? And she said, well, yeah. And she said, well, are you talking about my weight? And I said, well, I'm just saying it would be hard to work with clients when you're overweight because they'll call you on it. And she said, well, I am not overweight. I'm fluffy. I'm just fluffy. If you knew Pam, I mean, she had the best sense of humor, but she was serious. She said, it runs in our families. We've got big, fluffy legs, and we're just fluffy people. So, throughout her time at Shades, throughout her time after she left here, she discovered that she did have a problem with feeding herself appropriately. And she did get within a normal weight range, but I'll never forget that. Well, no, I'm not overweight, I am fluffy. So anyway, that gives you some little background about Pam. And Pam was a person that, I don't care what was happening, how drastic it was, she would tweak that situation to where she could find the good in it. So she wrote this book. It's called Until Your Fairy Godmother Arrives. And by the way, there's not one. She's not coming, so quit watching for her. But she put 7 steps to change. Now, I want to go over those 7 steps. And throughout the book, Pam mentions different things that she learned while she was here at Shades. And so anyway, so the first thing in the 7 stages, 7 steps of that she wrote about 7 steps to change. The first step is telling your story, to get your story straight. You know, one of the things that we do at Shades, we have people write their inventory, we have them to write an autobiography, and so Pam suggests that you write your story, write your history, and if you can't do it, write it first, start keeping a journal, and then take it from the journal. And then and I believe Pam might have got that from here about writing your story in 5-year segments. We have clients do that, to write your story in 5-year segments. Because if you can't see where you came from and where you are today, you're not going to be able to figure out where you want to go. So that's the main reason we have clients to look back at their history and see really what needs to be changed. Not everything in our history has to be changed. We don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater, you know. There is good in the worst of us, and so it's that's why it's good to get to be able to get your story straight and then start telling your story. Storytelling is one way to heal, and that's why the 12-step program has been so successful, because we tell our stories and to each other with with the same type of addiction that we have, and it's that identification, one suffering person to another one, and that's where the healing begins. So learn to tell your story by getting a good history of your story. And then through that, see what needs to be changed. And so the second one is setting changed goals, setting some goals on what needs to be changed. But be real clear on what needs to be changed, and do you really want to change? You know, there's a lot of people that say that they want to change, but when it comes right down to it, the fear comes in. Fear comes in, and the plans go out. So set a goal on what you want to change, and then make them in small, very small, reasonable goals. For instance, one of the things that I'll just say this one example. I had never traveled. The first time I rode an airplane is when I went to treatment, and I always wanted to travel, but I didn't really even know how to go about that. So, and this was before I met Pam or anything, but one of the things I did is, and I'd never been to a travel agent, so I wanted to travel, so I visited every travel agent in Abilene, and you know, they have those free brochures, and I picked up brochures on places I wanted to travel. Now, had I gotten into a plane and gone? No, but that was the beginning. And so whatever you want to do, start small and gather your information about the changes that you want to make. And so this goes into, and one of the things, again, I want to say, a lot of people don't want to change. They say they want to. They come to treatment and say they want to change. They talk to therapists and say they want to change. I want to change, I want to change, I want to change. And the thing that they miss is taking the action to change. We can say, I want to change till hell freezes over, but if we don't change, if we don't tweak some things that we're doing, nothing's going to change. If something doesn't change, nothing changes. So the third thing that Pam suggested was visualizing change. Visualize the change before, and that's kind of what I did with getting those brochures about travel. I started visualizing where I wanted to travel. And looking back, I was thinking about it this morning, every one of those brochures that I picked out, I have been there. I've been to Austria, I've been to New Zealand, I've been to all those places that I wanted to visit. See, because it puts it in your brain when you start visualizing. And so then when you start visualizing something that you want to change, spend 15 minutes a day, visualizing what the change will look like. For instance, if you're a smoker, visualize what it would look like for you to not smoke. Visualize how clean your bedding will smell. Visualize how you will not have smoke, marks on your fingers or your fingernails. Visualize how your teeth can stay clean. You know, smokers have, have that dental, that yellow stuff. Visualize that, clean teeth. Visualize how your body smells better. You know, start visualizing what it would look like to be a non-smoker. Because sometimes people just want to quit an addiction, and you can't just quit an addiction. You know, we've all tried to just stop an addiction. But you've got to bring the brain and body along together. So spend 15 minutes a day visualizing what your change is going to look like. And if you can perceive it, if you can really perceive the change, you can achieve it. And one of the things I'd recommend is make a vision board. And I've told y'all before about before I bought shades, I had wanted to leave the Serenity House, wanted to go and have a separate treatment center. And so I made a vision board of what I wanted to kind of look like, the colors and what I wanted my office to look like. Well, I'll tell you, I had never been inside the building at Shades of Hope. But when I got to where my office was going to be after I bought, or when I was looking at the building, the office had French doors, and you look out and there was greenery. It was exactly what I had put on that vision board. It's amazing. It's amazing what you can vision, what you can, visualize, and you put out in the universe, it can come to you. So just, so make a vision board. But start the visualization, what you want your change to look like. For instance, I had been overweight all of my life. I've never known a time that I wasn't overweight. And so I didn't do the step of visualizing what it would be like to be overweight. So I'd go on these strict 500 calorie diets, and I could lose 100, 120, 130 pounds in 6 months' time. In 6 months. And when I would get there, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I still had a hard time going through doors, afraid I still was too big to go through them. My brain had not caught up with my body. I had never visualized or even thought of what it might be like to have a normal sized body. And the next 6 months, I gained all the weight back. I did that 5 different times. 5 different times. But the last time, by the grace of God, and treatment, and following directions, and visualizing what recovery might look like, by the grace of God, I'll have 36 years, September the 19th. So, visualization. And then the next thing that Pam talked about is act as if. And those of us in 12-step programs, we've heard that, act as if. Some of us don't like that. But it works right at first for newcomers. And I've told newcomers that because they'll say, well, I don't know what to do. Well, I don't know this. I said, just act as if you are not a compulsive overeater today. Act as if you're a normal eater. Act as if you're not an anorexic. Act as if you're a sober alcoholic. And then when you do that, you act as if you're not a sex addict. And when you do that, then what you got to look at is the behavior behind the addiction. And so acting as if, and then, for instance, like if you want to be a business person, if maybe you don't have any education and you're in a minimum wage job, maybe you want to be a business person. Well, one of the things you might visualize is getting an education. And you can't just visualize walking across the stage, getting that diploma. You've got to break it down into little small goals. One thing, when I went into the field, I looked around one day and I thought, if my husband doesn't sober up, I may be having to make a living for my children. And I didn't have any education. I hadn't graduated from high school. I went my senior year, but I didn't graduate. And so I had to get my GED. And so in order to do that, I had to find out how to do that. I couldn't just say, okay, I'm getting it. I had to pick up the phone, I had to call, I had to ask questions, I had to go pick up the material, I had to read it, I had to study it. My little kids thought that was so funny. They would help me study, and they'd help me type my papers and all. And so, but in order to go to school, I had to get a GED. So this acting as if, it goes, you know, act as if you've already there. One of the things that one of my dear friends, who's a dear friend of Pam's, her name is Trudy Spring. She's a very good therapist, motivational speaker, and she was our clinical director for a while, and her husband was a program director. And she told me one day, she said, because I've always, since I've lost weight, I will tell you this, even when I didn't lose weight, I've always been pretty vain about the way I looked and the way I dressed and my makeup and clothes and blah, blah, blah. You know, and Trudy would always compliment me about that. And she said, I want you, everywhere you go, when you go to town, when you go to the grocery store, when you do whatever, I want you to go and look like you're a successful business person. Go look like, dress for, you know, you've heard these, dress for success. And she said, and you know, I really did that. She said, now, sometimes when you go to, you know, this is back in the days that we were kind of doing some hippie clothes, you know, long skirts and all that. She said, that's great for counseling, you know, working in the counseling rooms. But when you go to board meetings and all, dress in a business suit. Dress like a successful businesswoman. And then she said, suit up and show up. Go places to be seen. Go to the Chamber of Commerce. Get out and be seen out in your community. And then gather information about what you want to change. Gather the information. I've kind of gone over that. And then another thing Pam said on 5, it says, she talks about finding a mentor or a role model. Now, and later on in the book, she did talk about, you know, for 12-step people, you know, we are very fortunate. We have a process where we have sponsors. Now, the process is you ask someone that you see as a role model that has something that you want, and you ask them to sponsor you. You know, so we've got that built in. Now, if you're in business, you know, like I see people here that have their own business. Miss Jackie is one. I suspect, I make up that she has mentored people through her, because she is very well known in in Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky. And I just make up that she has probably mentored younger people, younger decorators. And she's shaking her head, yes, you know. And she probably had a mentor when she first went into the business. And same as Cora. Cora's a lawyer, an attorney. And I know for a fact that she mentors people all of the time, you know. And so we need that. We need people who we can emulate, whether it's in business, whether it's in our recovery, whether it's in parenting. You know, those of us who grew up in dysfunctional homes, I didn't know how to be a parent. You know, I watched my mother, and she was a sick alcoholic. I took care of her. My dad was, you know, violent and crazy and all of that. And so I knew that wasn't the way to parent. So we have to get with people who we want what they have and ask them to help us. And I shared the other day when we were talking about ADD, I didn't know how to help myself with ADD, and what was recommended is for me to get a coach. Now that was a mentor. She was in recovery for ADD, and she coached me for 6 months. And I had someone to emulate. I had someone to show me a picture of what it would be like to not have to practice ADD every single moment of my life. Now I can still do it. Something happened yesterday. I can't remember what it was. I'm doing an intensive, and I was in the group room, and I was talking to clients, and I looked over, and I saw a pair of socks that I had looked for yesterday morning. I looked over and saw them. I said, oh, well, there's my socks. That's ADD. You can just get distracted with anything. Now, I think other people might have looked over and seen the socks, but they wouldn't mention it. But I can't keep from mentioning it. I mean, that's what, oh, there's my socks. You know, that is ADD. Our brain can go like that in a heartbeat. So find mentors, sponsors, good business mentors to help you. And 6 is finding support groups. Now we talked about, and Pam talked about in her book, 12-step programs. I had a little problem getting Pam to go to Overeaters Anonymous. She went to some, but she wasn't a full-blown card-carrying member of OA. And I would tell her that if she was here, because she knew she wasn't. And that she got enough to realize what a 12-step program was. And she sent her clients to 12-step programs. And she did go to some open AA meetings and, you know, some Al-Anon. So she knew what it was, and she did recommend her clients to go there. So anyone that has any addiction or process addiction, absolutely, you have got a built-in support group through the 12 steps. Then other support groups is about getting with people like, I have a friend that has Asperger's. There's groups for Asperger people. There's also groups for their families. Or you take any disease, there are groups, you know, for them, support groups. Find you a support group, someone that can help you and you can help them. That's what support is. And then our taxes, well, I was going to say our taxes are going overhead. No, the sound of freedom is going overhead. We have an air base here, and I don't know if you can hear it, but the airplanes are flying across, and it's kind of hard to hear myself. I don't know if you can hear me, but anyway, if you're hearing that, it's the sounds of freedom. The airplanes here from Dice Air Base. Okay, so finding support groups. And then number 7 is once you go through the process, and I've just touched on the process, but once you really do the work about change, and I will tell you, it takes work to change. It takes some hard work. And I'm looking at people right here in front of me that could do this workshop because they have changed. They have been willing to do the work, and they've made lots and lots and lots of changes in their life. And so, number 7 is celebrate the changes. Celebrate where you are today. Acknowledge that there's been change. Now, the kicker to that is that there's no finish line. You don't get done. I don't care what it is, whether it's in business or whether it is treating an addiction or a process addiction, we're never done with it. We get a daily reprieve, a daily reprieve, a daily reprieve. And so we don't get to a certain point and say, okay, well, I'm done with that. We've got some business people here. They can tell you the same thing. I'm a businesswoman. Cam's a businesswoman. Jackie, there's my friend Leah. I mean, there's business women. There's and men on here. There's Cora. I don't care how successful you get in your business. It does not stop. You have to keep going. You have to keep doing this process daily. And then what happens is you begin to learn how to live well. Live well, living well. If we can model living well, living healthy in front of our children, we can be the best role models that our children or our grandchildren could ever have. If we can model that living well in front of them. And joy, you know, we talk about on our list we talk about our list of feeling words that shades. The last one is joy, you know, and people a lot of times have trouble with that. Well, why is that the only positive feeling you have? Well, it's not negative or positive. Joy is, and you know, clients early on think that they'll never feel joy again. But I'll tell you, joy is a learned behavior. It doesn't just happen. It's a choice. You can feel joy in the midst of chaos. I mean, last week during all of the breakdowns, and it was horrendous, folks. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. And I'd go in the afternoon and do groups, but I watched, you know, we already had our intensive crew assembled because we were getting ready to start an intensive last week, which we're doing that this week. So that crew was assembled, and that crew was Misty, you know, the food service director, and my daughter Kim, and then Ashley, who we call the nanny. She stays with the people, you know, at night, and then her son and Misty's son Daniel, you know, he does the cleaning. So we had a team assembled already. Had it not been for those people, I don't know what we would have done, because none of the staff could get in. We were it. No one could come in to relieve anyone. None of the techs, none of the therapists. They tried, they couldn't get out. So what I'm saying is find joy in whatever's happening. You know, they would sing, Misty would play the guitar, and they would sing, and they'd visit, and they, you know, they called it Shady Camp, yeah.
Camp Shady.
Camp Shady. They had a big slumber party. Now, you know, there'd be times it'd be a little touch and go there, but basically they had a good time. They made, they were talking about, they didn't make lemon out of lemonade, they made lemon slush out of lemonade. It was so icy out here. So joy can be learned, and you know, joy can be a goal within itself. You can choose every day to have a goal to feel joy. And so I want to read this to you, that our ability to freeze feelings, to deny problems, to deprive ourselves and live in stress, we choose that, folks. We choose that. We choose to be depressed. Now, I know you're going to say, well, I have clinical depression. Now, if you have clinical depression, you go to your doctor and they will prescribe some medication. And all that medication does is brings you up to baseline. It doesn't jack you up or bring you down. But then you take the tools that we have here or through the big book or what, and you're going to have to work more. You're going to have to work on both sides of that depression and take some action. You know, and it's hard when you have, you know, a diagnosed anxiety or diagnosed any mental illness, but you can work with it, folks. We see people all the time living in recovery, regardless of what their diagnosis is. And so we have to be willing to give up, you know, those frozen feelings, not being able to feel. We've got to give up being depressed and feeling deprived and having problems all the time. You know, we are going to have problems. That's what life's all about. But there's a solution to every problem. Do y'all know that? So I hope you got something out of this. And I want to brag on myself. I just can't keep from bragging on myself just a little bit. I don't normally do this. But I was looking back here. I read this book years and years ago. And I don't know that I read this section on back in the back where Pam said, list her own mentors and her role models. And there's 5 or 6 pages here. And there's some of the best therapists that I know in the state of Texas and the United States that Pam listed here. People that she knows that she listed here. Now, I surprisingly found my name on this. So I want to brag on myself. I want to read to you what Pam wrote, and I just read that in my heart when I was reading that. It said, Tenny McCarty, who taught me about 12-step programs and trained me to do group therapy. She is the best group therapist I have ever seen. Now, I needed to hear that, and you know, we all need to hear compliments. You know, we need, and so when you see someone, or around someone that is doing a good job at whatever they're doing, checking you out at a check register, or pumping gas, which you don't see that very much anymore. But when you see people, you know, doing whatever they're doing and they're doing it well, give them a compliment. Give them a compliment. people, we all need that. So that's what I have, and I can tell you a lot more. This little book is pretty thin. I asked one of her daughters this morning if there was still copies available, and she said her sister had some copies. And if any of you would like to have a copy of it, I could see if we could get you a copy. But Pam was a wonderful woman, and I wanted to just honor her today. I just had been looking at that book back in my little sunroom office that I have, and I thought, I want to do that on Zoom to honor Pam, because when she came to us, she was in the most horrendous, abusive relationship. I mean, physically abusive, and had no way of knowing how to get out of it. Now, through her own recovery, her primary practice was working with women, particularly women that had been abused. So that is really taking lemons and making lemonade and helping other people. So that's what I have, and talk about, let's share, talk about, have you waited on your fairy godmother to come rescue you? If you have, like I said, she's not coming, you know, so you can get that part up. There's not, you know, she's not going to come sprinkle fairy dust on you. You know, we have to suit up, show up, and do the footwork. So share how you have done some of these things. You know, how have you changed? And I'm sure you've used some of all of these 7 points that Pam had. Share, and if you have any questions, ask questions, or share your own story about how you have changed and are changing today. And if the process was difficult. And particularly those who are recovering from addictions, because we've got some brand new people that are from Shades of Hope that are listening in. What hope would you give them for changing? You know, we've got some recovering sex addicts on here, and we've got, you know, some recovering eating disorder people. We've got some recovering codependents. We've got recovering alcohol. You go down the list. Y'all represent it all. So what would you, you know, encouragement could you give as far as your journey and change that you could give maybe to our new people? So who wants to start?